Hi everyone, I'm Martha. I am an engineering manager at Intercom, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about this topic. This can help you build more powerful and more diverse organizations. So, all of this is going to be based on my experience as an EM at Intercom over the last 4 years. So I'll start by giving you a bit of an intro about who we are and the scale at which we operate especially. You may have seen our logo out there in the wild on quite a few websites out there. When you click on it, it opens our customer support messenger. We are a 900 people company, out of which 40% is research and development. So we are a very product-led business. We also have an engineering team of 230, and most of them are product engineers hired fully through a tech-agnostic approach. I'll take you through 3 main things today. First, what even is tech-agnostic hiring, because some of you might not be familiar with the context. Secondly, the discrepancy between what companies look for versus what they actually need, because this problem is at the core of what tech-agnostic hiring can help you solve. And finally, a bit more of a practical thing on how we have done it and a case study around it for us. To explain what tech-agnostic hiring is, I have to take you back about 7 years into the past. And you can give or take a couple of years here because that transition didn't happen overnight. So imagine that the year is somewhere around 2015, and at this point we do mostly what I'll be referring to as traditional hiring, for lack of a better term. And it worked like this at the time. You have very distinct buckets of developers based mostly around a back-end technology that they were very dominant on. And it was back-end focused because it was just the dawn of front-end technologies at the time. This had some challenges for hiring managers and for recruiters. For instance, if you were hiring for a very niche programming language, that could mean that you could spend a really long time looking for the right person, and you'd likely have to hand out the big bucks to get access to the top talent in that particular bucket. For developers themselves, this also came with its own set of pains. So if you've spent the last 10 years of your career becoming a senior Java developer, and you then wanted to take an interest in a different technology, this could actually be a step back in your career. Because in order to be a senior Python developer, for instance, you'd be expected to have a lot of deep expertise in that area and be really fast. That's when we started to see the tech-agnostic pattern starting to come up. And the way it works is that you grab all of these buckets and you hire out of every single one of them, with the purpose of onboarding that developer into your particular tech stack. And this does come at the expense of having to upskill that person in your technology. That transition, as I said, didn't happen overnight. So the way I'm going to frame it is like this. Imagine that you have a pyramid, and at the very top of the pyramid, you have the deepest parts of the skill set. So a very high Zoom level. And you can have frameworks here or programming languages, which is how we did it back in the day. But then as you move down in this pyramid, you start to become a bit more general. So the first step in this direction was around 2018, when we started to see words like back-end engineer, front-end engineer, full stack, and then further generalized more into software developer, still very focused around the coding aspect, and software engineer, which started to be more about the technical problems themselves. And finally, product engineer, where you're not just expected to care and know about the tech, but also know the product and the customer deeply. The landscape today looks a bit like this. Most of the industry is still focused on a pretty traditional approach, with only a small section dedicated to fully tech-agnostic hiring. And I'm not saying, I know this is opinionated, but I'm not saying everyone should be 100% agnostic, because that's really not the case. There are still many reasons why you would need deep experts in your organization. One of them is actually applicable to us. We've had machine learning teams for many years to support our AI products. So this requires a very deep scientific skill set, and we hired for those engineers separately from the rest of our product engineering process. But there's still a lot of takeaways that you can grab from the mindset itself behind tech-agnostic hiring that can help you improve your processes regardless of where you are. So you can think of it more like a scale, where you can go more or less tech-agnostic, either for your whole company or for particular roles within that company. This is what I believe the industry could eventually become. I think more companies could be doing tech-agnostic hiring, fewer pursuing the traditional approach, but most importantly, those that are doing traditional hiring should be better flagging the non-technical skills required to be successful. This helps create alignment between companies and candidates early on, before anyone has even started the application, and saves everyone time. Now, let's focus on those discrepancies that I was mentioning before, between what companies look for and what they actually need. Some companies look for something that looks like this. This is very, very common. So this is actually just the first result that turned up when I typed in software developer into a job hunting website. As you can see here, there's a lot of mentions to technical skills required and not a lot of anything else. But what I believe a lot of companies actually need is first and foremost someone who will use technology as a tool so that they can solve real business problems. These people won't let themselves be pigeonholed into just coding. They need to be able to see the direct impact of what they're doing in their day-to-day to the outcome delivered for the business. Secondly, people will be able to ship and build very quickly so that you can learn and validate. We're focusing on startups and scale-ups on this track today. And for us, one single project could be life or death for a company. So the quicker you can validate whether an investment is moving the needle or whether you might need to pivot, the quicker you can make the right decisions. And finally, and very importantly, you need someone who will do it in a technically sustainable way. You don't need someone who's going to be hacking something away that will be unstable or unsafe for the customer, or create a pile of technical debt that's going to slow you down in the future. Let's go back to that job description that I was sharing before. I could be doing every single one of the things on this list perfectly and deliver zero business value. I think this disparity leads to a lot of pain points for companies. First, you might not be hiring your processes enough to reach the audiences that you really want. Some symptoms of this can be you're getting flooded with applicants, but only a few are ever making it to final stages. Or the opposite, you're not getting anyone to apply for the role. Or worse yet, you're using your probation period as an extra part of the interview, with new starters not even making it through because there's misalignment between their ways of working and your company's. You might be preemptively disregarding great candidates. So imagine that you're hiring for Ruby engineers, but there's a great Java engineer out there who uses your product every single day. They're passionate about it and they're really happy to come and join you to build the product and push your company's mission. Or, more importantly, and almost no one thinks about this, these candidates may actually be disregarding you. Once an engineer is really involved with the day-to-day of the business and they're able to see beyond just the tech, it's very unlikely that they're going to go back to just caring about a bunch of bullet points listing a number of technologies. Finally, and very importantly, you may prioritize textbook knowledge over the fundamentals and make the industry even less diverse. My husband recently moved from electrical engineering to software engineering. And when he showed me some of the job descriptions, not only did they require a university degree, some of them told you which universities you could apply from. These companies are not just missing out on candidates like him, they're missing out on anyone who comes from backgrounds like being self-taught, bootcamps, career changers with years of experience in other industries, and skills like being proactive, resilient, unafraid to take risk for the sake of personal and professional growth. All of these traits are great to have on your teams. In my husband's example, he ended up working for a consultancy, which has a number of energy clients in their portfolio. So he's going to be able to use that experience as an electrical engineer in his day-to-day as a software engineer. Everyone wins in the process. Little bit of a blip with the... So, if you want to hire this person that I was describing at the start, it might just be that a more tech-agnostic approach is something that could be a good tool for you. So, how do you actually go about this? The way we have thought about it is a little bit like a step-by-step process. The first step in this process is to identify what you want versus what could be a nice to have. So a good question to ask yourself at this stage is, what would you lose a great candidate for? Think back to that really good candidate you had. You were excited about them, but you got to final stages, and then you decided to go with a no hire. That reason probably was a non-negotiable. But make sure that you distinguish that between something that's fundamental and something that can be learned easily on the job. An example of this for us is that we will hire people who deliver outcomes and ship product over building the perfect technical solution. And there are elements in our culture that make this possible. First, we optimize for the long term. So we're not afraid to give people that time they need to upskill in our particular tech stack, as long as they have the right mindset in place, because it's much harder to hire for the right mindset. We also are technically conservative by design. An example of this is that we have a backend and a front-end monolith. And we are very clear with candidates about this up front. Because if they are excited to build in the latest and greatest technology, it's probably not going to be a good fit. Once you know what you are hiring for and what you really want, design a hiring process around it that makes sense. Let's revisit that pyramid that I was talking about before. Where in the pyramid are you trying to hire? We are trying to hire product engineers at the bottom of this pyramid. So our hiring process needs to be based on a broad skill set and on a high Zoom level. Some of the technical loops that we focus on are problem solving, technical design, and pairing and collaboration. And we have non-technical loops such as a values assessment. When we do pairing and collaboration, we allow candidates to choose their programming language so that they can be comfortable while we evaluate the things that we really care about. How do they communicate with other engineers in the room and express their ideas? Do they understand the problem to be solved before they start throwing code around? Do they validate their assumptions? And how do they unblock themselves to make progress? Then, once you have your process, like everything else in life, you cannot escape these trade-offs. Identify them and prepare for them. The biggest trade-off for us is, of course, onboarding. We hire engineers from all kinds of backgrounds, but thanks to that advantage that I mentioned before, we have a backend and a front-end monolith. This has allowed us to be very streamlined in our engineering onboarding. So we have a company, engineering, and team onboarding. This means we don't spend time repeating ourselves, and we're able to get people up and running quickly. Another really good example is, for our front-end monolith, we use Ember. We have required deep expertise before, so we've hired members of the Ember team directly for set periods of time and for particular purposes. This has also helped create really strong bonds between us and the Ember community. This is an Agile conference, so I'm sure we all love this one. Learn and iterate. Your first interview process is hardly ever going to be your last. So, for us, a good example of this is we had one loop where we were having a lot of drop-off, but it was placed at the end of the interview process. So just by moving this to the first step, we saved hours of interview time. You can also play around with the loop itself and understand if it's actually getting you the results that you want. And do things like A/B testing with job descriptions. Which ones are getting you which types of candidates? The last step in the process is to go beyond, because these people are actually going to work in your company. So make sure that you evaluate end to end. Back to the pyramid all over again. So If I hire at the bottom of this pyramid and then I try to reward people for how many lines of code they're writing in a day, that's not going to be a happy conclusion for anyone involved. So make sure that your rewards and your recognition is at the same level that you're hiring for. An example of this for us is that we assess impact and values in our performance review process, dependent on level. So if you are a more junior engineer, likely this is at the task level. If you're a principal engineer, this will be impact delivered in a strategic area. We also evaluate non-technical competencies in our career ladders. So we are putting the product side and the engineering side, side to side. Execution is as important as skills such as knowledge and context, strategy and planning, and communication, both with other engineers, but also cross-functionally. I'd like to share some outcomes because I don't want you to think that just because we hire agnostically means that we don't care about the tech. You really can build a world-class team of engineers with tech-agnostic hiring. We serve 25,000 customers and billions of end users every day. And with our engineering team of 230, we ship to production 200 times a day across our backend, frontend, and infrastructure code bases, with 99.9% uptime. And something that personally gives me a lot of pride is that our average tenure is 3 years, which is 50% more than the rest of the industry, even large companies like Google and Facebook. And numbers aren't everything, so just to add a little bit of qualitative to this, our product engineers are not just technical experts in their domain, they're also product experts. They're deeply involved in our roadmaps and our decision-making around what we build and why we build it. They come from all kinds of backgrounds, so we have hired people from being self-taught to career changers to universities and everything in between. They're rewarded for the impact that they deliver to our company. And they operate in an environment that is very flexible because that tech-agnostic mindset does go beyond. So because of having our monoliths, they're easily able to move between teams, whether it's to support one project or more permanently. And that's been a factor in our high tenures because they're encouraged to look for those opportunities for their career development. I'll leave you with one cheat sheet containing everything that I've shared with you today. So remember to try and understand where you are today in the pyramid and where you would like to be in the future. Design a process that is consistent end-to-end. And remember, hiring really is just a start. Thank you.